Hi, this is Mark. Welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to bring you this information today. Thank you for joining me. There is so much hysteria in the YouTube market right now. I can't believe it. The economy is in a depression. The real estate market is going to be so much worse in 2022 and 2023 than it was in 2008. It just goes on and on and on. Today I'm going to look at a couple of videos, Patrick Bet David of Valuetainment and Scott Walters. I'll tell you where they're wrong and even where they're right, but it doesn't matter. And I'm going to do it with data and facts, not crazy, wild, the world is ending assertions. As always, if you could help me out with that YouTube algorithm and smash the like button. And if you don't want to miss any of my videos, you can subscribe as well.
But there's 3 P's that he talks about. Number 1 is predict. Always stay multiple moves ahead. Number 2, prepare. Get ready for what's ahead. And number 3, persevere.
In my opinion, this is the best part of the video. I agree with all of the 3 P's, especially the perseverance part, because real estate delivers many values over the long term, but you have to survive the short term in order to get to the long term and enjoy the benefits. Elon Musk was the one who came up with the 3 P's, but unfortunately he didn't do the entire video.
Dave Ramsey calls it fear porn, saying there's a lot of people getting scared and they're excited about the markets. Nothing's going to happen to the market. It's going to be all right.
First, let me say I am not on board with Dave Ramsey either. I don't say that nothing is going to happen. I don't say that real estate market can't go down. It can, it has. And it has turned in this case. What I do say is that the sky is not falling, at least not yet.
Think about it. When people stop making money and their wealth goes away, they have less disposable income. When you have less disposable income, there's less spending. When there's less spending, there's lower business profits. Lower business profits leads to layoffs. Then it's unemployment, and it's foreclosures and bankruptcies. Then divorce, crime, drugs, OD, alcohol, protests, riots.
Okay, I was with him right up to the point where he got to divorce. Bankruptcies and foreclosures do not always come after divorce. Then he went straight into Chicken Little mode. The sky is falling. It's not. And no, we're not getting into riots. That is just crazy talk. What Civil War and Revolution didn't want to get into that circle.
But watch refi. Applications for refis on existing mortgage dropped 75% from a year ago, according to the MBA's Refinance Mortgage Application Index. According to AEI Housing Center, which tracks mortgage applications by the number of rate locks, no cash refis have collapsed. You ready? By 93% from a year ago.
In business, there's a phrase that's called working as designed, and that's exactly what is happening as here. Working as designed. I have an entire video where I describe in detail what the Federal Reserve is trying to do here, and I'll link that video in the description down below.
Which means if these guys were making 50 grand a month, now they're making roughly 10 grand a month. If they were making 20 grand a month, now they're making roughly $4,000 a month.
In this case, anyone whose income depends on low or falling interest rates is going to get hurt earliest and hardest. And I'm sorry, Mr. Loan Officer, but that's you. I hope that you took all of those 50K months that you've had in the past couple of years and you saved it, that you saved a lot of it. Because the feast is over and you're heading into the famine stage. Months and months of famine. Why? Well, the answer is simple and explains the 2 numbers in the video. The 75% drop in refinances and the 93% drop in no cash refinances. Why do people refinance their mortgages? There are really only 2 reasons. The first is that they want to lower their monthly payment by getting a loan for the same amount but at a lower interest rate. Well, no one's doing that anymore. No one is refinancing their 2 or 3% mortgages at 7%. That explains the 93% drop in people who don't get a new mortgage and take cash out of the property at the same time. I'm only surprised that it's not 100%. I don't know what the 7% people are doing. Maybe they had some sort of a second loan or a HELOC that had an adjustable rate and they waited too long and they eventually decided they needed to consolidate those two loans into one fixed loan where at least they had some assurance what the payment was going to be. They should have done it a year or two ago, but I guess better now than 6 months from now. Otherwise, I have no idea why those people are doing no cash refinances right now. The second reason is to take cash out of your property. So you would get a larger loan, and in this case, unfortunately, you would also get it at a higher interest rate. Maybe you want to pay off some high-interest personal loans, such as a credit card loan or another signature loan. Maybe you want to do some renovations on the home. Those are all good reasons to take cash out of your property. That would be the 75% drop. So there's still 25% people who are doing that. These loans are not going away to the degree that the no cash refinances are, but there are going to be a lot less of these than in the past because, again, interest rates are much higher, and a lot of the people who were going to take cash out of the property have already done it at the lower interest rates.
If you bought a $500,000 house, let's just say your loan is $500,000 and you bought it 2 years ago and you got a nice 3% rate, your payment would be roughly $2,108. Now, if you buy a house, which roughly today the rate's around 6%, the same $500,000 loan at 6% is $2,997. That's nearly $900 higher. Now, if you were to buy the same $500,000 loan at 9%, watch what happens here. The payment becomes $4,023.
This is exactly what the Federal Reserve is trying to accomplish. They are trying to make the cost of money more expensive. And because the vast majority of people do not pay cash for a home, they get a mortgage, they borrow the cash, it makes purchasing homes more expensive. This should surprise exactly no one.
And so look at the numbers. January to February, inventory goes down. This is good for sellers. February to March, pretty much unchanged, good for sellers. March to April goes up a little bit, better for buyers. Look at April to May, goes up. Look at May to June, goes up 18.7%. Now, that's only 2 months. If this chart, the number to follow is this one, it's very important. If the active listing keeps going higher and higher and higher, and builders have a bunch of place that's not occupied, and that goes higher and higher and higher, and the amount of mortgage applications goes lower and lower and lower, you don't need to be a genius to know. You have to drop the value of your house to sell it.
Active listings is not the correct statistic to look at. What is active listings increasing really showing? Well, it's showing that the time that it takes for a property to sale is increasing. That means that more properties come on the market while the other properties are not exiting the market. Or in other words, that the days on the market for a house to sale is increasing. Again, this is no surprise. As interest rates increase, fewer people would be able to afford any particular home. But active listings increasing does not guarantee that prices will drop. A lot of these properties have been on the market for days or weeks already. I'm sure that a lot of the people who listed their homes in the last few weeks did not realize that the market was changing. They expected that their homes would sell over the weekend like they did 6 months ago. That's not the way the market is now. The question is, what is going to happen when these active listings do not sell? There's only two choices. First, the sellers decide to drop the price in order to make the property sell. The second possibility is that they will just let the listing expire and then the house will no longer be for sale. You will see a large increase in expired listings. That's only the case if these people really don't need to sell. At this point, we don't know what those people are going to do. The change in the market is much too recent to know whether these listings are going to expire or the prices are going to drop instead. What we can guess is that a lot of these are not distressed sales, and I'll go into why later in the video. If they were distressed sales, then we could be a lot more sure that the prices were going to drop or that the sales were going to go through rather than have the houses pull off the market and reduce the supply.
Which the last one I'm going to share with you in this topic is foreclosures. Why foreclosures this early? Aren't foreclosures are supposed to happen 6 months from now, maybe next year? What would you say is the increasing percentage of foreclosures that we have in 2022 compared to last year, same time? What do you think the increase is? 20% more foreclosures? 40% more foreclosures? 60% more foreclosures? Wow, it's not going to be 100%, right? You ready? We have 700% more foreclosures this year, same time than we did last year. Let me say that one more time. 700%. 23,204 foreclosures, according to the database management company ATTOM, Data Solutions. That's 700%.
This, in fact, is the correct question to ask. Foreclosures are definitely a distress sale, and eventually they will lead to price drops and an overall decline in the real estate market. I don't really know what data Patrick is looking at here. I went to the website he referenced and I found approximately the total number of foreclosures he was talking about, but the increase wasn't 700%. It was 118% or 187%, depending on which particular piece of data he was looking at. But that isn't even the real problem here. The problem is that whatever the percentage increase is, if it's 118% or 187%, or even if it's 700%, it's an increase from a very tiny number. 23,000 is an increase only from about 8,000 the year before. Those are both tiny numbers, as I'll show you in a minute. And the reason those numbers were so small in the past couple of years is that there was a moratorium on foreclosures. Banks could not foreclose, so of course the number was going to be very small. Governments at all levels were preventing banks from foreclosing on people. So the numbers were artificially small. In a normal market, most of these 23,000 people would have been foreclosed on in years past. It's just banks couldn't do it. Additionally, a lot of these 23,000 would have happened over many months, not in the same month. So the percentage increase is absolutely nothing to worry about. But let's take a look at the absolute number, the 23,952 number. Is that a big number? Well, no, not in comparison to 2008, which is what these videos are looking at. In 2008, the total number was over 2.3 million. That's 194,000 a month, which is 8 times the current amount that everyone is so crazy and concerned about.
Simulators of old 2008 versus today. In 2008, okay, the average worker, say, made $80,000 a year, whatever the number is. The house prices at the time were 8 times the average worker's earnings. So 8 times 80 is what? $640,000, right? You know what the number is today? 8.5 times.
I have no idea what these numbers are. The average income in the nation is known for both 2008 and 2020. And it's not 80,000, not in either year. It's 32,000 and 54,000. We have the numbers, so I don't know why he doesn't just use them. I assume that he's focused more on the multiplier than the income number or the home price. But why don't you just use the real data? You have to have it. You got the multiplier from someplace, and I assume it's by dividing a house price by the average income. So why don't you just use the real numbers?
So millions and millions, around 10 million people to be exact, bought during the crisis. They bought during the biggest housing bubble ever recorded in world history. But they didn't stop there. They went above and beyond appraised values for many of these people.
I may not be a psychic, but I still don't think that 10 million people are going to be walking away from their homes. What I really can't believe is the extreme and unsupported rhetoric that is being spewed in this video. Scott calls the last few years a crisis. Based on what? All the equity and wealth and jobs that were created? He also calls it the biggest housing bubble ever created in world history. How's that for an extreme statement? Again, based on what? He provides no documentation, no proof, no slides, no nothing. We may very well be in a housing bubble, but we will have no idea what the extent of that housing bubble is, how big it is in comparison to anything for months or probably years. Calling the past few years the biggest housing bubble ever recorded in world history is completely irresponsible and premature. I don't even know where Scott's 10 million number comes from. Maybe it's based on the National Association of Realtors' existing home sales for the past 18 or 24 months. I have no way of knowing because he provides no data and no slides. What I do know is that 10 million is approximately 3% of the entire American public, and that includes everyone, households, children, everything. I don't believe that 3% of Americans individually are going to walk away from their homes. The other thing is that, do you remember the foreclosure numbers I showed you from the past, 2007 and 2008? What I do know is that 10 million is 4.5 years just like 2008, and it's 12 years just like 2007. So if that were to happen, it would indeed be the greatest in world history, but I frankly think that's preposterous. It's extremely difficult to talk about the overall real estate market over a 24-month period, especially one where it's been accelerating like it has recently. It makes a big difference if you're talking about purchasing 2 months ago or 24 months ago because of the equity buildup that you got. Also, I know that it's a serious cliche, but real estate is all about location, location, and location. Those are the three most important parts of real estate. So where you're talking about in the country also makes a big difference. But again, Scott doesn't provide any of that information, so all we can do is look at nationwide stats.
And pay over asking price for these properties. Not even what they were appraising for. They were, in order to get their offers to stick. So they were immediately upside down the second they bought these homes.
Okay, there is so much to unpack in this crazy, crazy clip. Yes, people were paying over asking price, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were paying over fair market value. In an accelerating, increasing market, the asking price by the seller may very well be below fair market value. That's how housing prices increase. Given the demand for properties and what happened to property values, that's clearly what happened. Second, 10 million people did not overpay over the appraised value for their properties. That's also ridiculous. Most people do not pay cash for a home. If you pay cash, you can pay whatever you want for the property. You can pay 2, 3, 10 times fair market value. It's up to you. But if you're getting a loan, the bank is going to want an appraisal, and they're not going to loan you money over the appraised value. That simply doesn't happen. Third, again, these 10 million people were not immediately underwater. They weren't underwater for two reasons. First, there's a time period that we're talking about. And as I'll get into later in the video, a lot of people who bought 12 or 24 months ago have already gotten a lot of appreciation. Second, and the biggest thing that Scott never seems to take into consideration is the down payment. If you're putting 20% down on a property, there is no way that you're immediately underwater. It's simply impossible. You can see from these two charts that anyone who bought 24 months ago has almost $90,000 in equity that has built up because of appreciation over the last 24 months. And that's just nationwide. That's an average of hot and cold markets. For a buyer in Phoenix, which has been a pretty hot market the last couple of years, appreciation would be over $135,000. That would give them $135,000 in equity, and that doesn't even include their down payment. If it were a standard 20% down payment, that could be as much as another $80,000 in equity that they have in the property right now. He doesn't specifically say this, but Scott seems to be implying that all 10 million of these buyers purchased their property with no money down. That didn't happen either.
And reported on, a lot of the biggest metros in America are already in a complete, absolute free fall. Primarily the properties in the areas of the country that had the biggest booms in their real estate now are the ones crashing the quickest.
Again, this is a false claim. It's nonsense. It's not supported by the data. Two of the markets that I follow, Phoenix and Las Vegas, have regularly been among the hottest markets in the country over the past couple of years. Phoenix and Las Vegas have often been 1, 2, 2, 3 in some order over that time period per the Case-Shiller Housing Index. Here are the price increase values for San Diego, Las Vegas, and Phoenix in June. All three had over 20% increases year over year, according to Case-Shiller. All three would qualify as being among the largest metro areas in the country. And these appreciating values are not out of the ordinary. I picked 1 month, but this is a representative month over the last 2 years for these three cities. As for whether these markets are in free fall, I'll let you decide that. San Diego is down 1.5%, Phoenix is down 4%, Las Vegas is down 3%. Maybe it depends on what your definition of free fall is.
But the 10 million people that bought in the height of this buying euphoria, they're the ones in the biggest at-risk group, because those people now are maybe, if they're lucky, at a break even or upside down in their purchases.
This is the perfect clip to summarize the hysteria and unsupported assertions in this entire video. 10 million people did not buy at the height of the market. 10 million people are not underwater in their houses. 10 million people are not at risk. I have debunked a lot of the claims in these videos. Now I will go into specific detail as to why 2020 is not like 2008. Not only will it not be a disaster, not only will it not be a lot worse than 2008, it won't be as bad as 2008. The first reason is equity. Equity in the property, that people owe less than what the property is worth. In 2008, that was a lot less true. 50% of people were underwater in their mortgage. They owed more on the property than the property was worth. This was a direct cause of the terrible and toxic loans that were being made in 2008. This is not a problem in 2022 with the average person having $300,000 in equity in their property. This is a large buffer if prices do continue to drop. Additionally, anyone who purchased in the past few years got a rock bottom interest rate in the 3s, possibly even in the 2s. This will lock in a low monthly payment for them. The interest rates in 2008 were in the mid 5s to mid 6s, depending on what time frame we were talking about. The other reason 2022 will not be like 2008 is because of the root cause as to what caused the crash in 2008. That is explosive, toxic loans that mortgage lenders were making in 2008. The quality of loans that banks were making in 2008 became a lot lower. This was a conscious choice by the lenders in order to make more loans. A loan with a top quality borrower is called a prime loan. When the banks began accepting borrowers who had spotty credit history, lower income, possibly no credit history at all, these were called subprime loans, and they were lower credit and they were riskier, more likely to go into default. Making the problem worse was the type of loans that the banks were making. They started making adjustable rate loans. These loans come with initial teaser or lower rates, which are below market, and then they adjust upwards towards the market over a certain period of time, normally 2 or 3 years. Because the initial interest rate is lower, this allows borrowers and buyers to get larger mortgages and buy more expensive homes than they really could afford or that they could get with a fixed rate loan. The final piece of this toxic 2008 stew was the Wall Street banksters. The bankers on Wall Street needed more and more financial products in order to fuel their money machine. They needed to sell more bonds. Corporate bonds and government bonds were no longer enough. What they needed to do was they needed to get into mortgages. They needed to begin selling mortgages. Wall Street packaged individual mortgages and then sold them as a package to investors. Originally, they were packaging prime loans, loans that were unlikely to default, and selling them to investors. But again, just like with corporate and government bonds, there weren't enough prime loans to satisfy the Wall Street banks. So they began packaging subprime loans. This was another reason that banks began reducing their qualifications for borrowers, because Wall Street was willing to buy those mortgages. In fact, they demanded to buy those mortgages. Wall Street began packaging a lot of poor loans together, a lot of subprime loans. Their theory was that if you put enough loans together, even if they're all bad loans, then that will make the entire package high quality. This was wrong, and it was complete folly, as we would find out. What this demand from Wall Street resulted in was a cottage industry of fly-by-night mortgage lenders whose only job was to get anyone they could find, anyone who was breathing, to sign up for a mortgage that then they could sell to Wall Street for money, a lot of money. The banks began doing this by creating riskier and even riskier loan packages that they could sell to Wall Street. The first of these loans was called a NINA loan, or no income, no asset loan, also called a no document loan. These loans had been around for quite a few years. They were not widely used in the past. They were mostly used for self-employed people who did have jobs, but it's just that their income was more difficult to verify, and it was more unpredictable than somebody who's hourly or on a salary, who gets a regular paycheck and then at the end of the year gets a W-2 statement from their employer stating what their income for the year was. Again, this became the same problem as past, is that the banks couldn't create enough NINA loans, so they took it one step further and got an even more lax loan program called a NINJA loan. This stands for no income, no job or asset. You might wonder how someone with no job could possibly pay back a mortgage loan. Well, as it turned out, and it should have been to the surprise of no one, they can't, and they didn't. But that wasn't a problem for the borrowers because they were putting no money down. It wasn't a problem for the banks because they were selling all the loans to Wall Street. It wasn't a problem for the Wall Street banks because they were packaging all these disasteroid ninja loans and selling them to investors. It wasn't supposed to be a problem for the investors because the Wall Street banks and the credit agencies promised that if you packaged a lot of subprime loans into one large package, it became just as high quality and just as risk-free as a prime loan package. At least that's what Wall Street was peddling to the investors. The lenders added one final time bomb to this entire package, and that's related to the adjustable rate mortgages. ARMs start with a low teaser rate, and as I mentioned, because the rate is lower, buyers can get a larger mortgage and buy a larger, more expensive house than they could really afford. But unfortunately, the teaser rates go away, and eventually adjustable rate mortgages adjust, and typically upward, because they have to get to prevailing interest rates, and interest rates were starting to rise as well. These no money down teaser rates allowed people to get multiple properties with no money down, and one infamous story of a landscaper who put no money down, got 5 ninja loans, and defaulted on all of them. The borrowers weren't worried about any of this because they didn't expect to keep these loans beyond the teaser rate anyway. They thought within 2 to 3 years, property values would have doubled like they had been, and they would just sell to somebody else. This is called the greater fool theory, and it worked until it didn't. The lenders had an answer for this problem too. Normally, a loan payment is whatever it is. For an adjustable rate loan, it's based on whatever the current rate is on the loan and the outstanding loan balance. For a fully amortized loan, you would make a payment that would pay off all the interest that month and then a little bit of the principal. And that at the end of the loan term, usually 15 or 30 years, the loan balance would be zero because you would have paid interest and principal along the way. But these loans were too expensive for the borrowers who had no income, no job, and no assets. So the lenders came up with what's called a pay option arm. This gives the borrowers 3 options. First is you can make the regular fully amortized payment, which pays some principal and interest, and then the loan balance goes to zero. Second, you can take an interest-only payment in which you only pay however much interest has accrued that month, and the loan balance does not go down. Then at the end of the loan term, 15 or 30 years, you still owe exactly the amount that you borrowed. But even that wasn't enough for the banks and the borrowers. So they came up with a third option, an option in which the interest is not even covered. They pay less than what the interest is owed, so their loan balance actually gets higher every single month. One of the benefits of real estate is that over time you pay down the loan, and so that even if the property doesn't increase in value, you have more equity in the property. The property is worth more than what you owe on it. With pay option loans, that was not the case. And because the borrowers put no money down into the property, and after even 1 month of a pay option arm, they owed more than property was worth, when property values began to decline, this gave borrowers and buyers an absolute incentive to just walk away from the property. They had no money in the property was worth less than they was worth, so why would they not walk away? They did, by the millions. None of these problems exist in 2022. I've done a video that again I'll put in the description as to what lenders are doing now, but to summarize, ninja loans, dead. Pay option loans, dead. And lenders are actually tightening up the requirements on borrowers right now. I'm not like Dave Ramsey saying that's all fear porn, that nothing is happening, that the market can't go down, that it's not going down. The market is changing. That's clear. It's clear that Washington, D.C. wants changes in the economy. They want inflation to come down, and they're doing that in part through the real estate market. What I am saying is that this disastroid, world is ending hyperbole is wrong and it's dangerous. The current data does not support what these YouTube fearmongers are peddling. That's why Scott puts up no data, and in fact why Patrick's data is wrong and doesn't support the assertions that he's making. My question for Patrick and Scott is, who's your audience for these videos? The first video talks about being prepared, which is great advice, except it's too late. Whatever the storm is that's coming, it's already here. If you haven't refinanced, it's too late. If you're a loan officer, it's too late. Your refinancings have already dropped 75% or 93% or whatever the number is. It's time to batten down the hatches. Not time to panic, but time to realize what's going on and what you're going to do about it. So if I were a loan officer, I hope that you saved a lot of those 50K months, and if you were going to get out of the market, I hope you did your retraining 6 months ago. If I were a seller and not in the market, I probably wouldn't get into the market right now. If I'm already in the market, what I would not do is chase the market down. You can make a series of price reductions and still not get the sale that you're looking for if you're chasing the market downward. I would ride it out and wait until the market has stabilized and then put my property back on the market. For me, the more interesting category of people are buyers. And again, I've done a video detailing exactly what I would do if I were a buyer. I'll link that in the description. I'm Mark. Thank you for joining me on this wild e-ticket ride through the real estate market and the crazy YouTube hyperbole, the world is ending ride. If you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you would engage with me. Go ahead and leave a question or a comment down below. I do respond to all of my comments. And until next time, keep that cash register spinning.